Hi, I'm Edu Beretta here and this is Animation Pandemic. I have received this piece for feedback and I found it very interesting because it showcases some interesting issues that can arise as you learn to animate. In particular, you may find yourself mastering a workflow to the point that you neglect to double check the essential requirements of animation like posing and silhouette. Like in this case, for instance, in which the author of this animation was following some sort of animation layered approach which relied heavily and justly so I would say on space switching techniques. If you do not know what space switching refers to, you can watch my video on this very channel. When we follow this type of approach, we usually start by animating the body first, and once that works, we do animate the hind and front legs. This method is very efficient, especially for creature animation, because it can give you very clean, smooth motion. However, in cases in which one tends to focus too much on the workflow, there are some problems that are going to stay there in your animation and you want to take care of those. By the way, if you're interested in creature animation, you can visit my website and there will be a link to an animation Panther walk, and in there you can access a course that teaches you how to animate big cat walks like Panther, for instance. You will find the link in the description of this video. The course doesn't do rendering, it just covers the animation part. And it includes all the work in progress files so that as you follow the class, you can actually compare what I am doing in my files with what you are doing in your files. That should make it easier to spot problems. And now let's go back to our animation. Overall, the animation feels pretty smooth. However, while you animate, you should always be checking topology. And that's because if I look at this particular area of the arm, I see there's a lot of bumpiness going on in this area. The geometry feels a little bit clunky there. So I'm not quite sure whether this is going to look okay in render or not. And my feeling is that there are probably some controls in there which are pushed a little bit too much. So as you animate, every now and then you want to have a look at your geometry and check that the topology is neither overstretched or crumpled as you create your pose. In this case in particular, I think you might have a problem with the topology of the arm in there. I think there are some controls that need to be ironed out a little bit so that you get a nice smooth topology in there as well. Also, if you find yourself at a stage in which you have successfully blocked out the core features of your animation, you want to have a look at contacts and kickoffs. So for instance, if I look at this pose in here, I can clearly see how the front paw finds support and stays there for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, nearly 7 frames. Whereas if I look at the animation that we have in here, the front paw finds some support at frame 18 of the animation and never quite has that level of support. As a result, the motion of the tiger jumping down does not feel quite supported by the pose. Although I have to say that there is a little bit of a beat before the tiger jumps down, and that kind of helps because most people will actually look at the body and not at that paw in particular. If we proceed to frame 23, we have a moment in which the topology again on the chest area is all crumpled. Even in the clavicle area, I can clearly see there is a problem with topology there. So this kind of stuff is not quite good for rendering purpose, and usually what happens is that the supervisor might as well stop this animation until this problem is sorted, or maybe this will go to the next department and then once they render, they will send it back to animation for fixing. In some companies, you may find that these problems are being sculpted out by a special department that takes care of it, but usually you don't have that luxury. So you want to make sure that when you operate your rig, you're not breaking the geometry. Again, on the posing side, if we check the hind paw in here, it lands and it stays there to provide support. And if we check the animation, the hind leg kind of slides straight there and then it just stays there offering support indeed, but all the toes are just staying there. You see they're all parallel to one another, so it would be good to have a pose in here. I mean, you will probably have to cheat, but you see that in here the toes are covering the edge of the platform, so maybe the saying toes in here could be rotated down so that they cover the edge of the platform and then give us the feeling of claws trying to hold on to the platform itself. On frame 28 we have a little bit of a problem because if we check the reference, we see a clear nice shape in here for the front leg, while in the 3D geometry the front leg is a bit crumpled again, the geometry is a bit dodgy there. And also it seems to me that the tiger is actually showing the top of the hand, so to speak, while in here you're showing a little bit more of a profile. So I think you can twist the hand to show us a little bit of a top. And you can probably cheat this position on the arm by moving the clavicle forward. And that will probably get rid of most of the intersections that you're going to have. The hind legs are not very believable in the 3D model, because if you track the 3D model, you have a big portion of the hind leg being flat almost on the platform, which in the 3D model you can't quite have on this pose because the bum is quite far forward now, while in the reference is still to the back. So the legs can actually rest on the lower portion of the leg. So in here, probably you would want to fix pose 25 so that you can create this kind of line of action with the leg, which is quite different from the one you have in your 3D model. As you leave the platform, watch out, because these two hind legs are supposed to provide support. So you can't just slide them through the platform up and down. They need to provide that support, and then they will eventually just get off the platform. On frame 33, as we go towards the pose of maximum extension, the tiger model seems to lose quite a lot of anatomical correctness. So if we check the thigh in here, that is the line of action that we get. In here, the thighs are completely broken, unfortunately. So you really need to try and match the same line of action you have in the reference, otherwise it won't work. And down here, you really have to have a look at the topology, because it feels broken in more than one point. Also, if you check the line of action of the body, the upper line of action here, the spine in particular, I think you could pitch the pelvis a little bit more clockwise in here, just like I'm seeing it happening in here. And then you should probably try and have the neck a little bit higher here, just like it happens in the reference there. So that you have a little bit more of a continuous line of action. In this pose in particular, which is so critical, you're breaking the geometry and the anatomy a little bit too much. And then 2-3 frames later, once the weight is full onto the front legs, you really want to have a straight line of action going down for the front leg. If you check the reference, it's there in there as well, so that we can feel and sense that weight being onto the tiger. And again in here, check topology, because it feels like the geometry is breaking again. Also, once you land, try to avoid having the paw float about, because it will take away the sense of weight that you really want to have in your animation. As you progress onto the next pose on 38, you want again to double check the line of action of the body. I think you're nearly there, but your topology tends to break a little bit where the tail is and in the chest area, and the neck seems to be going into the scapulas in here, while I think you want to extend the neck quite a lot more here. And in general, with creature animation, you have to spend a lot of time and attention onto the shape of the pose, because the 3D model will have very often pose that looks like boots. If you check the reference here, it's very difficult to know what's going on in the reference, but I can guarantee you that you are not going to have this kind of shape in the pose, because that would break the anatomy quite a lot. You're going to have instead a pretty continuous line going down to the toes. So you really want to try and mimic that. On pose 40, again, you have a topology problem there. The geometry is crumply. In general, the reference is a little bit more stretched, especially with the neck. So again, you want to try and create that line of action. You're nearly there, but this part of the neck is not really that convincing yet. And then as the animation moves forward, you really want to check the shape of the paw, the front paw in here, which really looks broken. And in general, the topology around the arm again. And another thing that tends to happen in big cats is that the clavicle is pushing up, the scapula is pushing up quite a lot in there, and you want to have that shape going on even in your 3D geometry, otherwise it will look like a different character altogether. And the same kind of checks you want to have throughout the animation until the end. Animating a character leaving the screen is almost always a bit deceptive, because at least in my case, I used to think that part was really not that important, but it can really break believability when the character starts crumbling apart towards the end of an animation. We were buying into it, and then it kind of breaks apart. It makes it difficult for the audience to believe in your animation. So in general, always try and check the line of action of things issues in particular when you leave the frame, because this is clearly broken and maybe people won't be able to tell the difference, but their brain will have seen something odd going on, especially say in this area. So what I do, I actually animate in 3D until the character is out. Even if we don't see it, I still animate it, or at least I draft up the animation so that when I spline, it will be much easier for me to produce believable animation for the half of the character which is on screen. Tail action looks okay, but towards the end, as the character leaves the frame, it kind of gets stuck here, so maybe you could add a little bit of flexibility there. In general, the animation feels fluid, it feels smooth. This is probably one of the cases in which an animator got the workflow right, but maybe they were so busy with managing the workflow that they forgot to check the poses and in general the topology of the character and the correctness of the volumes. And volumes are quite relevant for animation, so you do want to take care of them. And we always have to be mindful of the fact that in some companies there may be a department that sculpts out anatomical issues when the geometry wrinkles up too much, it crumples too much. But in general, you can't rely on such luxury, and the shot usually is sculpted when the rig can't physically make that pose that you're trying to achieve as an animator. But I think in this case, there are some controls which are being pushed a little bit too much. Having said that, once this shot is going to be cleaned up properly, it's going to look quite good. So well done so far. I hope you have found this video useful, and if that's the case, please like, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Have fun!